G'day everyone, John Harms here, coming to you from my study in the People's Republic of Northcote, where it's a bit stormy and gloomy outside. Great for an afternoon for a chat. I'm editor-at-large of the Footy Almanac, the website and the book, and it's my pleasure on behalf of the Geelong Regional Libraries to welcome you to the library's first virtual panel discussion. So the Geelong Regional Library Corporation acknowledges the Wadawurrung people and the Eastern Ma original owners of the lands on which these library services operate. And we pay our respect to Wadawurrung and Eastern Ma elders past, present and emerging. And we acknowledge and celebrate First Nations peoples of this land as the custodians of learning, literacy, knowledge and story. So we're here today to discuss this great book, 1989 Grand Final, written by Tony Wilson. And really looking forward to the discussion. People will know so much about this game already. Well, we'll get the inside story. So before I go any further, let me introduce its author, writer, broadcaster, man about town. Some of his books include Players, Making News, Australia United, more recently The Selwoods, and a book with Bob Murphy. He's done a lot of TV, he's done a lot of radio. Tony Wilson, welcome.
Thank you, Harmsy. Also in the People's Republic of Northcote. We possibly could have gotten away with it with the one-on-one rule and social distancing, being in the same room, but you're getting a nice look at the kids' playroom up here at my house.
Tinsel Tony Wilson I know well from 3RRR in the old days of radio, which was a lot of fun. And I reckon he's about a 2-iron away from me as we're sitting here in Northcote. I'd also like to introduce someone who actually played in the game. Great role he had in the game as well. He's from a football family. His father played for Geelong. He played for Geelong from 1980 to 1990, over 150 games. He was skipper one year, but that's another story. Mark Yates, great to have you.
Yeah, g'day Harmsy, g'day Tony. I'm in my dining room and I just realised I had the dog in last night and I think it might have peed on the floor. It's a bit of an odour in here. Might have to open the window shortly.
Now, welcome to everyone from all around, well, maybe the world. I think there might be some listeners in Indonesia today. There's been a few tweets flying around, which is great to see. Now,
Selamat pagi.
You guys can participate in the live webinar. There's a Q&A function, a button there across the bottom. You might have to tap it if you're on an iPad. If you're on a PC, it's just you click on it. You can ask a question or make a comment, and then those of you who can see those questions, you can vote for them, and that will, I believe, elevate the question up the list, and we might even get around, if we can shut these two blokes up, to asking a few of those. So there'll be a bit of a to and fro participation, but what an incredible game it was. Tinsel, tell me, why does it deserve a book?
Well, of all games, whether a game deserves a book might be a broader question for the literary world. But if any game does, I think this one does. There's probably no more storied game in the history of footy. There's probably no more replayed game in the history of footy. It exists in that beautiful moment where television coverage was just good enough to satisfy the modern eye. And I think also the players were at a stage where they were moving towards professionalism. Yates was driving a backhoe loader at the time. So they had other jobs. They had real lives as well as footy. But they were training enough where their skills and their game patterns were pretty fantastic. But they didn't train enough to have 25 assistant coaches and game plans drilled into them 24 hours a day, which meant that defensive structures dominated the day. And so it was still one-on-one footy, it was still open footy, it was still goal-scoring footy. And I think that's why the game is so attractive to the eye. And I'll just throw in, I think we're going to get to this, the personalities also that day make it very memorable. Real Hall of Fame type stars and people that were larger than life. They were the icons, the footy icons of the age. Especially on the Hawthorn side because they'd played in so many grand finals in a row, and so faces and names like Dipper and Dermy and Dunstall were really household names. But Geelong were emerging, so it's the classic champion versus the challenger story. Yates was on the older end of the players in that Geelong side, but the young stars had kind of captured the imagination, I guess, and Ablett was somewhere in the middle, and something we've really never seen before or since. So there were so many ingredients to it. It was when I started writing the book, I was initially commissioned to write 35,000 words in a kind of a sports shorts series. But I started writing it and couldn't stop pretty much. And it ended up at 55,000 words in a glossy C format paperback. So it really, you know, I think it deserves a book.
Mark, why do you think it deserves a book?
For one, it was the last of the old VFL games, the last game before it went to AFL. And I think it was deserving. It sort of encapsulated the whole 150 years. But the other thing too, as Tony said, Hawthorn were a magnificent footy team. And at the start of 1989, Malcolm Blight had only just come to the club. To do what he did in 1 year was phenomenal. And yes, we fell short, but geez, we had fun. And we really played in a free-flowing. His philosophy was to kick goals as quickly as possible. I kind of didn't fit into that because I was a bit more defensive, so much so that he dropped me from the team towards the end of the season. And I had to get back in, had to play in the seconds. It's the first time it ever happened in my life. And you know, he was an attacking coach and a different coach, and it was a real classic of the new guy on the block with the modern ideas versus the Alan Jeans disciplinary. Dermot does a good take on his voice and that, and it just scares the hell out of me. I would like to be coached by him. But Blighty was magic, and it was all out. It was just full on, no holds barred, and a great game.
Yatesy, I remember you talking about getting dropped for that game. Was it that you were playing on someone like Wayne Carey and you thought you were going well? You kept him only to a couple of goals or something to three-quarter time, and he sort of said, "You're not running off. If you don't run off, I'm going to drop you." Is that the exact way it unfolded? Very
close, Tony. Your book hits it on the head. We're playing North Melbourne with about 5 rounds to go, and we'd been undefeated all that time. We got beat early in the year, but we were on a roll. We were winning by 90 points a game. And I stood Wayne Carey, and we were about, I don't know, 7 goals up at half time. He'd kicked 1 on me or 2, and geez, he was a freak. I mean, he could kick it from anywhere. Pushing him to the boundary line, he'd still kick it. So, but I thought I'd done a pretty good job. But Carey actually moved. Pagan moved him off me and put John McCarthy on me. And at three-quarter time, I reckon we were 10 or 12 goals up. And Blighty singled me out, said, "Yates, if you don't start running off and getting some kicks, you'll be dropped." And I back-chatted him, something to the effect of, "Well, I'm doing my job and we're winning." And yeah, I found myself in the seconds the next week. Those weren't the exact words. But Blighty, yeah, and I had to fight my way back.
Blighty's one of the great characters, and we'll come to quite a few of the characters. Let's set the game up by telling the story of the year. What happened throughout the year in the lead-up, Mark?
In the lead-up, well, go back to the first few rounds, I suppose. We came out and we were beaten, I think, in four or 5 games, I think, in retrospect. But the whole thing changed, I think, when we played Hawthorn. I think it was round 6. He threw all that, we're attacking all expenses out the window, and we're going to play man on man. So he went through the 20 blokes we had in the team. Gary got Dipper. I had Gary Ayres. Gavin Exel played that game, and he must have been on Langford or someone like that. But during the course of the game, wherever they went, you had to go with them. And that was the whole thing. It was back to man on man. 20 blokes versus 20 blokes. Anyway, one stage, I think Jeansy must have woken up to that and said, "Well, come on, Dipper, have a rest." So Gazza goes for a rest, and it was just phenomenal. And at half time, I think I'd kicked 3 goals. I was playing in the forward line. I was absolutely wrapped. I knew I could kick goals. They just wasted me in the back line. Anyway, so I kicked 3 goals on Ayresy because nothing against Ayresy. He's a great driver in heavy traffic, but I was a little bit quicker. So I think we were well up at half time. And after half time, we went out and I see Gary Ayres standing in the middle of the ground as a ruck rover or a centreman. So I trotted into the middle and bloody sent the runner out, Dean Schutz, and said, Yates, you go back to where you were. No, go to a halfback flank. I've been demoted as a forward, kicked 3 goals and a half to halfback flank. I was ropeable, absolutely ropeable. And history shows Gary Ayres carved us up in the middle and got BOG, and they won the game. Plus, I had a little incident which damaged one of my testicles in the second half. So I wasn't in a very good mood from that day on. I just wanted to play Hawthorn again.
So what happened there? What's the incident? Because it has a lot of say in what happens then in the grand final.
Well, there it was on the halfback flank. I think it was in the third quarter. Don't know where bloody Berkey was, the ruckman. But anyway, I'm standing there, facing the boundary umpire who's pulled the ball in. And I remember catching Dermot on the boundary line thinking, what's he up to? Because he was a bit of a wrecking machine. Anyway, I got my eyes on the ball. Boundary umpire throws it in. And I don't know what happened, but I've seen replays since, but I could feel it. Anyway, I just all of a sudden felt enormous pain in my nether regions, and I was winded as well. And it was just play on. There was no free kick or anything. And I later learned that Dermot had run at me from front on, and he actually touched the ball, which is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He was a master at bending the rules. Touched the ball, but he also touched one down below as well, his knee. And I've still got a calcification to this day. You know, people don't believe me. They can. You know.
So then, how did that inform what was going on in grand final week? So you've come off a preliminary final win, which is sensational. You're just in sparkling form on a beautiful day at VFL Park against Essendon. So what happens in that grand final week?
Well, for one, Harmsy, I was lucky to be there. I got suspended in the Melbourne game prior to the Essendon preliminary final. Got 1 week, luckily got 1 week. If it had been 2, I wouldn't have been part of it. And but during that week, I just was so thankful that they beat Essendon, and I had a chance to play in the grand final. You know, I was pretty confident that I'd be in the team, but Drummy Blighty had a philosophy of not changing a winning team, and luckily Drummy damaged his leg, hamstring, couldn't make the cut, so we didn't have to make a decision. And I was in the team. We always trained Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That was the first time I'd ever come across that, and I still swear by it. Anyway, we normal week, as normal as can be. Geelong was just buzzing, obviously. We were all working though. I mean, these blokes today are probably thinking, geez, if we go back to the 80s, we'd still have a job. Because we worked and we played footy, as Tony said. And during the week, you know, people are wishing you well and all that. But it's in the book, Tony's book, the story about my backhoe. But, you know, I was sitting there and these blokes didn't have a clue who I was. So my sunnies on and, you know, and they're in the trench laying pipes and starting to hang a bit of shit on some of my teammates and me. So I sort of hopped out for the back and took my hat off and my sunnies and said, hey, listen to you blokes, I want to be careful. Don't speak ill of somebody, don't know who's around. Anyway, words to that effect. So Friday we did the grand final parade, and then we came back to Cardinia Park to do what we called the polish, you know, just 20 minutes, light touch stuff, make you feel good, run a few cobwebs out. And then we had the meeting, team meeting, always had the team meeting after training, talk about the team, the tactics, and what we were going to be required to do.
And what was that? What did Blighty say to you?
Well, he didn't say much. He did. Okay, he drew the team up on the board. Right at the end of the meeting, everyone knew where they were playing their positions. And I noticed he had me on a half-forward flank. And I thought, oh, he's seen the light. He wants me to kick a few goals in the grand final. No, alas. He said that he was worried about the wrecking machine, Dermot, and what he'd been doing during the year, and he didn't want any of our blokes to get hurt, particularly the blokes in the middle, because he had a knack of running through the middle and could get Couchy, Busey, Bairstow, our prime movers. And he said, we just need an insurance policy, Yatesy. He didn't instruct me. He said, what do you think? And I said, wow, fantastic. And I just touched my little calcification and thought, yes, this will be interesting.
Well, Mark, it might be a good time to bring Tony in here and get him to talk about the character of Dermot.
Yep.
Okay, so Tinsel, tell us about Dermot. When we all know Dermot's reputation, he's larger than life. But at that time, what was his reputation?
Oh, he was not heart and soul gives the impression of a kind of a workman-like club man. He was the supernova that blew across Hawthorn. The way I opened the book, in fact, is I was a 16-year-old in the bottom age under-19s, and the most memorable moment of my year training there on the Monday and Wednesday nights was going up the race and going into the club rooms to get a drink, and Dermot's there and he's oiled up and he's got the blonde ringlets flowing and he wears his diamond studs and his chest is enormous. He arm curls what I can bench press and he throws his hand out, big smile, g'day, you one of the under-19s. Dermot, he always introduced himself, so Dermot Brereton, he put his hand out, said his name as though he wasn't my ultimate hero, and and I wasn't even used to shaking hands, and suddenly I'm shaking hands with him, and he sort of, that was the reason I told that to introduce the story, is that he kind of owned the club. He was the biggest personality in the club. He's a guy who needed the reinforcement of people. So some great players even say Jason Dunstall is a guy who doesn't need the reinforcement of other people. He's an isolated character, whereas Dermot constantly needs to be loved and to be recognised and he gives back. And so, he used to go to the under-19s games just to be around the club, and none of the other senior players did. He was just he owned the club. It was I called him he was a blonde perm Don Corleone. He was the one. And so within that context, he was also, as Yates says, he was a wrecking machine. He perfected the ironing out of players, and the people that would attest to it are ones like Paul Vanderhaar just 2 weeks beforehand. And people often say, did Jeans know that they would come for Dermot? Well, if he didn't know, he should have known, because there was 20 minutes in the second semi-final where it was completely obvious that Dermot won the game through vigorous aggression. And there could be no Geelong coach, Blight or anyone else, who could watch that second semi-final and say, we are going to ignore that. Dermot can do what he wants. It was incumbent on Blight to say there needs to be something done about Dermot. And I'm not saying a hit, but there just need to be need to provoke him, to get him off his game. I don't know what you do, but you can't let him run around like he did against Essendon. So he'd been doing that for a couple of years, taking out players in the middle. At the same time, he'd been playing brilliant football. He was, in grand finals, he's kicked 8 in the losing grand final in 1985. He's kicked 5 in his first game in the final in 1982. By the time he's standing, by the time Yates is lining him up in 89, he's a bona fide legend, and it's amazing that what happened that day actually solidified that legend further.
Well, let's hear what happened, Mark. You've run on. The deaf choir have sang the national anthem. Alan Border's done the lap because they've won the Ashes back in 89. Blighty's wearing a sky blue knitted pullover. It's just so of its time. You tell us what happened. Take up the game.
We were in the seconds grand final and the under-19s as well. So we were watching the seconds play, and at half time of the seconds, I used to walk out, have a look at the ground, and I just kind of thought, I pictured in my mind that where Dermot would be standing, where I would start, and just visualised there was no other plan, which wasn't complex. Just put your shoulder down and try and nail him. that's another thing too. I must give credit to Malcolm, and also I think my own discipline. We discussed this, and he said, "Mark, no fists, nothing illegal." In fact, they changed the rules after that game. They couldn't pin me because the ball was within 10 metres, and I did hit him fair and square with a hip and shoulder. The siren was bounced. We ran out, as you said, all the parties on. I lined up. I looked over to my right. And Mick Schultz was standing next to Derm, but he was on my side, which would have impeded the target. So I just gave him a little nod, and he went round the other side, and the ball was bounced. It would have been much better actually if Paul Deere or someone won the hit, because the ball would have been a bit closer to Dermot. But I just went for it. I had no, what would you say? I was in a zone all my life. I wanted to win a grand final. I didn't want someone like Dermot hurting our blokes. Neither did Malcolm. Neither did any of us. We wanted to make a statement. And yeah, I just made a beeline. Whitey had talked about 3 minutes, give me 3 minutes to let him know that we're not going to be intimidated. And I thought, well, shit, he can do a lot of damage in 3 minutes. So why wait 3 minutes? Yeah, shit. Do it.
So, Hamzy, it took Yates 4 seconds to get there. and just to get a context on the great athlete you see before you, Yates could run an 11-second 100 when he left school, and told me he was down to 11.4 or 11.5 by 1989, but he was a missile, really, like in terms of having a big body and genuine pace as well. So there was probably no one better equipped for that job.
Yeah.
It was the
If
best.
I hadn't snapped my Achilles 2 years earlier, I would have got there in 3 seconds. But I was also at the end of my career, and I was myself and Mark Boss, we came through Geelong together in the under-19s and played our careers together. We made a pact that we would retire after that game. Hell, win, lose or lost, you know. We were old defensive type players. We didn't feel we were in the same mould in Blighty's eyes. But because of what happened in the grand final and the actions with Dermot, there's no way known I was ever going to retire. I mean, I wouldn't be able to live with myself not to give him another crack at me, and that has happened, which is good.
So you've really timed the bump? Like, it was a good hit, obviously.
Yeah, it was sweet. He actually he actually saw me, I reckon, from about 4 metres, perhaps, and he acknowledges this himself. But I was coming quick, and he tried to get his elbow around. I'll do a little demonstration here. I have got trousers on. He saw me like that, and then he went to turn like that, but I was there, and I hit him right here, but I reckon he damaged himself because his elbow would have crushed into his spleen.
So here's the first question, Mark, from the audience. How did Dermot get up?
Is that to me?
Yeah, to you.
I don't know. I really don't know. He got up pretty quickly, and then I put my face into him, and I could see his eyes rolling back, and he just let out this exhale, and then he crumpled down. So I didn't. He had plenty of time to get up. He landed in the square. The game was delayed. They moved him out, but he's a courageous man, and I don't think, to be honest, I have utmost admiration for his will and his strength.
So,
take up the story, Tony, from there.
So, from the way it was told to me, by various players, including Mark and Dermot, was that so Dermot's bounced up in the way it was drilled into Hawthorn players. You don't stay down, and so that was a 20, 30-year Kennedy commandos on. You do not stay down, and to watch Dermot get up in the video is, for me, it's you talk about the Don Corleone of Hawthorn. That is the model of how you get up after you get hit. He is up within 2 seconds. And Dermot, and then you see Mark kind of brace, I guess because you don't know what Dermot's going to do. So Mark's unaware of how hurt Dermot is. And so Mark braces. Again, it looks like Mark might go again. Dermot says that the most asked question of his career is, did Yates come again? And both of them say that no, because as Yates just described then, the air disappeared out of Dermot, and Dermot said, it just, when pain takes a few seconds to register. And so he's standing there ready to go, and then realises it's kind of over for him. And he goes down, and I think, even if a light push in the chest from Yates as Dermot disappears under the ground with a sentence that's in the book. He gave him one line to go on with, Yates, which I won't say to a library audience, but I did get a confirmation from you of what the expletive was, and it really isn't Saturday afternoon library fare, is it?
Well, it's not, but also that was my motivation, was revenge. It just so happened it was in that game, and a coach was smart enough to know one of his players was extremely motivated. I thought it was a good tactic, and as I said, you'd probably get 10 weeks now, but the rules were such. It was a vigorous shepherd, extremely.
Yeah. And Dermot acknowledges it was within the rules, certainly within the 10 metres, and he didn't hit him in the head. So it's clearly was within the rules. And so Dermot, I think, takes his hat off to Yates and always says, it's nothing that I wouldn't have done myself. And I think we all believe that. And in fact, there's speculation to this day. Blight doesn't believe Dermot when Dermot says that he wasn't coming for anyone. And in fact, there's a very interesting story about the state of mind of Dermot as he was at the bounce, because he had been targeted in the pre-game. He'd been targeted by his own coach, Alan Jeanes, who had I won't say a father-son-like relationship, because Dermot says that devalues his own relationship with his real father, but they certainly had a special bond that was right back to when Dermot was 15 years old and being driven home from Hawthorn training, as maybe the prodigy being driven home as far as Cheltenham by the coach, and he'd take the train the rest of the way home to Frankston. But they were close in a way that few coaches and players are. And Jeanes decided in the last minutes of the meeting before the game to do a speech where he revealed personal information of Dermot's. Dermot had a away trip where he sat next to Jeanes on the plane, and he'd said some things about his family history, and Jeanes, which Dermot still won't reveal to me what these things are. It's to do with Dermot's grandparents in Ireland and his parents, and something to do with that, the relationships there. And Dermot, those details were relayed to the whole group, and Dermot was furious. And Jeanes was yelling at Dermot, "Today, son, the gun is pointed at your head today. Today, you decide what sort of a player you are." And he'd said, he yelled at him in the Jeanes way with the big crescendos, and he revealed personal activities, personal details that Dermot didn't want him to. And by the time Dermot was at the door of the rooms, Chris Whitman said, "I thought he would rip the door off." That's when Chris Whitman told Dermot he loved him, which I love that detail. And Dermot said, "Yeah, I love you too." But he was Madigan said, the miracle to me is always that it went in the direction it did, because every sign in that Hawthorn room was that there was a player that was going to pay in that ground in the first minutes of that grand final, and nobody thought it was going to be Dermot.
Can I just chime in, Tinsel, and say this is the sort of level of detail that turned this book from a 30,000 short book into a genuine story of a full story of the game and the backstory to the game. But whilst all this is going on between Mark and Dermot, and there's, you could wax lyrical about it for a long time, there's a game of football going on, and what happens in those opening seconds, Tinsel?
Well, the ball, I say 3 seconds for Yates to hit Dermot, 10 seconds for the ball to hit Ablett's chest. If you're talking about the most billable individual on the ground, the one who's lit up the football world for the previous 3 weeks. He's kicked 8 goals, 5 the previous week, and people sometimes laugh that this is one of the most famous performances in grand final history that Ablett's going to put on. We probably played better the week before. We had 23 possessions and kicked 8, and the week before that he's kicked 7. So he's on a roll that we've never seen in finals history. And the ball is on his chest at the 10-second mark. The crowd is going absolutely bananas. This is probably the most exhilarating 30 or 40 or 50-second start to a grand final. I think it certainly is in history. Ball hits him on the chest. He goes back. I interviewed Scott McGuinness, and I loved talking to Scott McGuinness because that man has humour and humility. And he just said, you've been in the zone since the moment he's been told he's going to be picking up Ablett. He's in the zone, and there he is. It's 15 seconds into the game, and Ablett's having his first shot from 45 metres out. How bad could this get? and he puts it through. Beautiful kick. And so, and there's various accounts of, almost no one seems to have seen the Yates hit. Most people had their eyes on Ablett and the ball. And so, it takes, even the way it's relayed in the box, that, was it Greg Wells or was his brother Yates? Greg Wells sitting next to Blight has enjoyed the goal, how good was that? Couldn't have started better. And then he remembers that there's a Yates plan in place. I had the other thing go, Malcolm, and Blighty's got his Alpine cigarettes and very 1989 in the coach's box. Pulls back, perfect. That's his answer.
But Tony, Gary Ablett came out with such explosive power on that lead, and it was a lead straight up the ground as well. It was a huge statement. But speaking of characters, I mean, he's one of the great characters in the dramatis personae. Mark, tell us a bit about Gazza.
I was just brought back memories just then when after he kicked that goal, because I watched the replay, I remember going down the goal square and just whacking him in the heart, and he whacked me in the heart, and I said, "Good job." He said, "You too." Because Dermot was lying in the middle. So we got a flyer. I remember seeing Billy Brownless running around and moving it up, and got a bit carried away. Gazza's the best footballer I've ever seen in my life. And started at Hawthorn, which is a whole story. I mean, you guys know the history, and he was phenomenal. And there's a good bit in Tony's book, which is very accurate, about how Malcolm harnessed this bloke. And I can remember pre-season in '89, Gary hadn't been for about 2 weeks, and Malcolm actually brought us together out at Deakin University after training and said, for every session Gary Ablett has missed, he will do double when he gets back. And to Gary's credit, when he came back the next week, he had to do double after training. And he really, I think, because Blighty was such a talented and gifted footballer, he appreciated Gary. Battlers that slog it out a bit different, but Gary, to his credit, knuckled down, and he loved full forward. He loved kicking goals. You kick him from the wing, kick him anywhere, but he was a powerhouse, powerful through the hips, mean. If you watch highlights of people's careers, you've got the big marks, you've got the big goals, and you've got the big hits. He's the whole package. He really is an amazing footballer and person.
So Dermot goes down to the forward line after he gets up. Were you ever in the mind of going with him, or were you waiting for the instruction, or what happened there?
I think we actually made a mistake, and Malcolm admitted that on the bus on the way home, having one of his Alpines, and we were devastated. We'd lost, and we talked about that. And he said to me then, he said, "I think you should have gone down with him." And I said, "Yeah," and that's not detrimental to Steve Hocking at all. Purely, they're a little bit more height. And after I'd done what I did, knowing Dermot's personality, when Hock was standing under the ball, if it had been me under that ball, Dermot would have whacked me fair in the back of the head, and I would have got a free kick. So yeah, look, can't what ifs, but he's a legend for getting up and doing that. I'd just like to make a point though. There's probably a few people watching that I need to straighten out. A lot of people have said to me, "You didn't hit him hard enough. You cost just the game. You know, he went on and kicked whatever. He kicked 3 goals. The first one was the big one, and he didn't hurt any of our players, and that's what that was about. It wasn't about anything else. So yeah,
I think also it's worth pointing out, not that I sort of want to get into the morality of taking players out, but it was an effective hit in the sense that Dermott produced some kind of superhuman efforts to get his goals, but his output was he had less than 10 possessions on the day, which was well down on what he would have expected, and he played in a forward pocket the whole day, and he was not the centre half forward focal point that he would have been without that hit. And you talk about whether he hit him hard enough. You did break his ribs, and he had a tear around the capsule of his kidney. He refused treatment. Dermott's told the story as many times as Yates has, and there's a performance element to it, and I love listening to him say it. One is that he went in at half time and he says, and I start passing blood and I'm pissing into this bath and red blood on the floor. I panic. I go and grab the doctor, Terry Gay, and I bring Terry in and say, this is what's happening, and I can resume urinating. And what do I do, Terry? And Terry, and Dermot does all the big pauses and everything and says, and Terry said, look, drink a lot of water, Dermot, and don't tell anybody. And that's how Dermot tells the story. And so I'm sitting there writing a book going, well, that's great storytelling, Dermot, but it's not very fair on Terry because he's actually a doctor who, is that exactly how it happened? And I rang Terry up and he said, this is how it happened. He refused treatment from the moment he was hit. We were trying to examine him. We were trying to get him off the ground. At quarter time, he wouldn't allow any doctors to come over to him. He was refusing to be examined because there could be a result that he didn't want. Then
Tony, Sorry, Tony. I'll verify that about the quarter time, because after quarter time, he walked out of the huddle and he was about 20 metres away and said to me, I'm still here, Yates. And I said, well, come over here.
So he gets to half time. And actually what happens is that he panics when he sees the blood. And Terry Gay says, we need to examine you, Dermot. We need to properly examine you and work out what sort of damage you might have. And at this point, they've already had pay the price speech and everything, and the players are milling around, and he just turns his back on the doctor and starts walking towards the door. And as he walks out the door, almost like a henpecked mother, Terry Gay starts saying, "Oh, look, I drink lots of water." He's got an uncooperative patient and someone that is bleeding. And Terry said, "Look, it wasn't good medicine, but." He said, my instinct was that he would not be able to be doing the things that he was doing if he was in serious danger of his life. So whilst he could still walk and talk and run and be involved, I was confident he wasn't internally bleeding to a dangerous extent. But it's a horrible situation for a doctor to be in, and probably not one that would happen now.
So it wasn't just that first incident, Mark. It was a pretty wild first quarter, wasn't it? What was it like to be out there?
Yeah, it was frustrating, actually, because I do think we got carried away. That was the plan to negate the hitman. But then I think some inexperience cost us that lead, But that's once again, you can't change that. But Hawthorn were obviously seasoned at just playing the game. We over enthused.
Because Darren Flanagan comes on, Tony, in the second quarter, and what's his take on it? Why he played so well?
He just said, how good's this coming on after blokes have just punched themselves out for 15 rounds in 30 minutes of footy? He says he's running around and picking up kicks and taking marks. I think it's reasonably self-deprecating from Darren because he just played a blinder. He was just one of those when everything goes right, and he does that for three quarters. He could have kicked 3 goals. He kind of was unlucky not to get a 50 that would have gotten him his first, and kicks a beautiful 50-metre goal in the last quarter as well. And he's actually with Ablett and Buse. He's the dominant Geelong player on the ground.
So he had an interesting preparation as well, Tony, Saturday morning. Darren.
Well, this is
He has the pub.
Yeah, he does, and he buys the his vacuum cleaner breaks on the Saturday morning, and so he spends his morning going down to the department store to buy a vacuum cleaner for the pub, and I put that sort of stuff in. A lot of the book is filled with the sort of atmosphere of 1989, and the idea of a player cleaning a pub carpet on the day of the grand final, I think, is just mind-blowing within the modern context. I asked Mark, what were you doing on grand final morning, Mark?
I washed my car, and I never washed my car.
And I like
something was up. They said to me, Mark, you're washing your car. Good luck today. And I said, yeah, thank you.
I love the image, Harmsy, of Yates. He told me that there were neighbours sort of flooding, because you're organising your day. They're flooding they're probably doing a longer day at the MCG than Yates, and so they're all in their gear and waving to him as he's washing his car, and good luck, Yatesy. It's just a great sort of sense of normality. Yeah,
it was great.
Darren tells some great stories about Ablett as an athlete. Tony, a couple of those.
Well, I need these confirmed by Mark. But the one I put in the book was that that Malcolm was forever trying to invent, or he was if a drill was repetitive or non-competitive, Gary would lose concentration and not be not really trying it. But if you made it competitive or different, then you get a performance out of him. And so Darren told me, and Tim Darcy told me as well, that you went off to Bacchus Marsh Lion Park. I presume not amongst the lions, Mark. But tell us what the activity was at the Lion Park.
Chasing rabbits.
Yeah. What was that?
Well, just I don't know. I guess Gaz is from the country. We're all country boys. A lot of us down here, and it's good fun chasing rabbits. And you still run, and they dart around and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, but one thing with Gary and Darren Flanagan, it mightn't be in the book, but similar thing. Pre-season, we used to have these 5 to 10 kilo medicine balls, and we had this. You had to chuck the medicine ball or throw it as far as you could. And Darren was 6'7" and massive, and he'd thrown it 20 metres or something. And Gazza just wandered past and said, "Oh, what's going on here?" And he goes, "Oh, you're just going to try and chuck it." So Gazza just picks it up and goes through it 5 metres further than Darren. Like,
that's amazing. 6'7" playing it, and they've all got a collection. Every Geelong player has a magnificent Gary sporting performance story, like a freak show performance. And there's one that Flanagan tells about a game of tennis that Stephen Reynoldson played against Gary, because Reynoldson was apparently a pennant player, experienced childhood tennis player who ends up lining up against him, and Gary turns up. I can't remember the footwear. I think I got it wrong. I've got the Harms Dunlop volleys in the story, but it was when I heard the story post-publication, it's a different type of footwear. Gary's certainly not equipped for tennis, though. And he ends up losing the first set 6-2, winning the second set tiebreaker 7-6, and then winning the last set 6-love. So basically, it's like Ablett learnt tennis over the 3 sets in order to be able to beat a pennant player. And Reynoldson had been playing for 20 years and lost to him. It's just incredible.
I believe that. Yeah, he was a phenomenal. He turned his hand at anything, really.
So second quarter, Tony, the Cats settle and get back into the game, but they just can't make a dent on the margin, and Gazza starts going crazy.
Yeah. So that's the magic 12 minutes of Gary, where he kicks one reasonably regulation. I think his second is a mark and goal. Langford didn't do much wrong, but the third is an immortal grand final goal. You might even say it's the greatest grand final goal. That's the one at the boundary throw-in. Again, Flanagan tells the story. He's sitting there. He says he's got gear under control, and then bang, back of the head. When you get someone jump on you in footy, it often feels like you've been punched in the back of the head, and you get up thinking like, what the hell was that? And so Darren's thought that someone's allowed a Hawthorn player to run, and then, as he's holding himself up, he sees that the ball is sailing through the goals, and what Ablett has done is collect the ball, and in a motion that, you know, requires grace, power, coordination, basically an impossible act of turning and being able to kick the ball strongly enough and straight enough to put it through goal post. Yeah.
Tony, being out in the ground when that happened, I was at centre half back. Blighty put me back to the back line, and when he did that, the hairs on the back of my neck just stood up. I looked at Bossy, I looked at Tim Darcy, I looked at our back line, and that's when I knew we could win this bloody thing. You know, we didn't, but that's when that one act, and the Hawthorn bloke went, oh, shit. You know, like, that was absolutely a Superman.
And I remember I was 16 years old and in the Olympic stand, and it was like a moment of bipartisan, like all barriers. So there'd been such a brutal and angry game up to that point, and the crowd was riding that anger, and it was not a, you know, but at that point when he did that, that's just like Hawthorn or Geelong. You just stand. It was just beautiful.
It takes a bit to remember a line in such a book, but I think you described it as the Christmas Carol moment in the trenches. Is that right?
Well, that's what I'd forgotten I'd said that. That I'm better than I thought, Holmesy, but that is...
Oh, I love that line.
It's the Christmas truce, isn't it? It's
that
moment
absolutely.
Of... it's where you go out and sing Silent Night with the Germans. It was very much like that.
It was a transcendent moment, and it's interesting. Bruce Dorr passed away a couple weeks ago, the great Australian poet, and he wrote a poem called "The High Mark," which is about that very. I mean, this was in a boundary throw-in, but the same principle where everyone just stops and goes, "Wow, that's sort of something special."
Yeah. Yeah. And so he gives McGuinness a bath. Actually, I've forgotten the one on the boundary where he's falling back. That might be the second one. So the second one's the falling back one-hander, which is, again, an extraordinary act of skill. I mean, Yates, you'd tell you that when you hit the ground, when you're falling back like that and you hit the ground, the ball dislodges. It's so hard to control. But his strength and McGuinness said that he thought he'd got him out of bounds on that. He just misjudged it, didn't hit him hard enough. And McGuinness got found out in those 12 minutes. A lot of us would have been. But he got thrashed, and the change is made towards the end of the second quarter. And by the end of the second quarter, Langford, who's the Hall of Fame fullback, you know, arguably the greatest fullback of his era, is suddenly on the greatest full forward. And I would argue that the next 65 minutes is the best one-on-one
sensational
combat that's ever happened in footy.
In the last quarter, the mark, Tony, just remind people of that the Ablett fly, but the Langford position.
Oh, yeah. So this is in a chapter that's called It's All Happening. And there's a moment, it's in my, it's like when you become a seasoned veteran of watching a game, you know, where you no longer just love the Ablett out of the ruck goal. You start just really getting into other little bits. But there's one where the ball is kicked out of the centre. And I love Madigan's description of panic because he knows he's going back. And this guy has been flying now for 90 minutes. He's boiling. And so he knows Ablett's back there and Ablett's coming. And the line in the book is he is right to be worried because Ablett is coming. And Ablett ends up, he takes off and his legs kind of wrap around Madigan. And Madigan said, I'm picturing myself, I'm going to be Kel Moore under Snake Baker. And he just is. This mark is going to be massive. And Ablett gets takeoff, Ablett gets air. But what he does is goes slightly too far under it. And so his legs are kind of wrapped around Madigan and he's lying backwards. He's lying right backwards like that. So he doesn't get an apex on it. And then so from behind, Langford kind of comes in and just plucks it gently out of Ablett's arms. And so you just get this, the crowd at that point is just fever pitch. It's so much noise. And to have the calm and the experience and the dare that Langford had to take the mark, then he goes and he kicks it off over to the wing. And that's when, on the footage at least, Catwoman flying past, Catwoman with breasts out. And the vision switches at Channel 7 give her about 2 seconds. It's just this flying streaker with the breasts going and the Catwoman outfit. And Darren Flanagan says that he looked around at that moment and he says he and Catwoman crossed over by less than a metre. And he said, what if Catwoman had taken me out? What a story that would have been.
There's news to me. I didn't even see Catwoman. I didn't know she was there.
But Tinsel, what was your advice to Catwoman?
I didn't see if a better writer than me would have tracked down Catwoman for her chapter. My advice was just that she is a forgotten figure in streaking history. So think of Helen D'Amico in 82, where at a boring patch of the first quarter of a reasonably one-sided grand final, she frolics with Dool and the rest of the crowd. And we all remember Helen D'Amico. So my advice to exhibitionists is to streak during quiet patches of boring grand final.
Choose your grand final, Tinsel. Choose your grand final.
That's right. Well, it's Mark Yates is, he's talked about this game as much as anyone. He says he doesn't even know Catwoman's in it.
So, Mark, there's lots of other physicality. Ablett just smashes Dipper. On the wing. And Gary Ayres gets Ablett at one stage. How Ablett gets up from that is quite remarkable. So,
Dipper
how
smashed
tired?
Buddha.
Yeah.
Smashed Buddha. That was brutal.
That's a big one.
Yeah, but it was. There were hits all over the place.
So you physically worn by three-quarter time. What does Blighty say to you guys?
To be honest, John, I wasn't listening. I'd done my knee, and I had the trainers taping me up, and he put me at full back just to kick out. And after about 3 kick-outs, my knee was no good. And that's one of my big regrets is not being able to finish the game. Ironically, Dermot finished the game. I didn't. It's one of my big regrets. But if you can't run, you're in trouble.
Was there a sense amongst the boys, though, that you were coming, that you had plenty to give?
Oh, no doubt. Look, I think you could just feel it, especially when you look at some young blokes out there. When a bloke called Shane Hamilton came on the ground, much like Darren Flanagan, played a great game of footy. I coached in Tasmania and I used some of the clips from Shane Hamilton from the 89 grand final about how to play football and withstand pressure. He was magnificent, Shane. We had Spiro Malakalis, they're not household names. We had David Cameron, he was crook and kicked the goal towards the end. It was just, we just kept coming. We just gave them too big a start, and that was the problem.
Just seemed too, Tony, that when Geelong were really putting pressure on getting to within 3 or 4 goals, Dean Anderson would fire one out of his backside or something like that.
Well, you mentioned the Dipper elbow, which was a horrible elbow. You got 5 weeks for it, for knocking out Gary Hocking's teeth. And I used the description, it almost felt like it knocked the teeth out of Geelong too. Not necessarily from a performance point of view, but things went wrong in the minutes after that incident. So the first one was Dean Anderson managing to kick a left foot floater through from the forward pocket. And he says that he was only really just moving the ball towards goal. He didn't mean to kick it. Peter Curran then gets the ball wide on the other side, and he hoofs it up and kicks a pretty amazing goal as well. I mean, again, he meant to kick it, but he might have got 2 or 3 out of 10 of those. It just goes through for him. And then there's a 50-metre or 15-metre paid against Tim Darcy. He's a bit stiff because, there wasn't one paid in favour of Flanagan at the other end 5 minutes earlier. It is an unlucky 5 minutes. Everything goes wrong for Geelong for 5 minutes after Dipper knocks out the teeth. And so they didn't get – Hawthorn had that capacity all day. And when you think of how many goals were kicked, but Geelong would come and either Geelong would kick points or Hawthorn would kick they got another one back, and the lead – Geelong gets to 18, it goes back to 24. Geelong gets to 24, it goes back to 30. And it's only really in the last 10 minutes that the sense that Geelong were coming turns into a scoreboard flood. Yeah.
So then it's 6 points at the end, Mark. What's the feeling on the final siren?
Just numbness, I suppose. Especially when you're older and you realise the opportunity that existed. It's devastating. The one thing that I must say though, and I still believe, there's no shame in losing if you've given everything you possibly have. Someone has to lose. And I'm proud to say I was part of that team and proud of every one of my teammates. And we were beaten by a better team on the day, but I'm still really, really proud of the way we conducted ourselves and ran such one of the teams of the century to scare the living daylights out of them. Yeah.
So I've got a question here from Sasha Lennon, who's up in Brisbane. He writes for the Footy Almanac, and he's played a bit of footy and played quite a bit of Gaelic footy. He's a big Hawthorn man. He says, Mark, in One for All, the story of Hawthorn Footy Club, which is the history written by Harry and Michael Gordon, says of the 89 grand final, it's grindingly tough, agonisingly close, a celebration of wondrous skill and absurd bravery. Which part of that description better sums it up for you? The skill, the bravery, or the absurdity?
Bravery, probably.
Yeah.
You know, there's plenty of skill. There's plenty of skill out there, but there's plenty of bravery shown that day. None more so than Dermot and Dipper. We had some blokes that were crook too, but it's not for our place to ever talk about that. You know, and I think we're happy with that.
Tinsel, how do you view that?
So I will talk about that for the Geelong people. So Yates hurt himself. I think it was in running, madly, really back with the flight of the ball, and that was the end of your posterior cruciate ligament. I think, wasn't it, Yatesy? But that's why he leaves the ground at three-quarter time. The person he replaces on the bench, Tim Darcy, had been taken off because of the state of his ankle, but he's deemed to be better than Yatesy, so in terms of health. So he comes back on, but he can't run. And there's actually there's a bit in the last quarter where the ball is just it ends up going out of bounds, but it's Dermot diving on his shattered ribs to try to take a chest mark. Then in comes the next guy in is Darcy, who can't run on his ankle, trying to pick it up. And then in comes Tucker, who's got a mangled hand. And it's just like it's seriously just broken people everywhere. And the chapter I wrote on that is called Broken Bodies. But Burke had done his ankle early. There was certainly a lot of carnage on that. Stephen Hocking had a testicle injury from the grand final that we only found out about after the event. So there were broken bodies on both sides, and because of the Hawthorn winning, and maybe because of the seriousness of the Di Domenico and Brereton injuries, the folklore attaches there. But certainly it was a courageous era, and that's the word I'd go for too of those three.
Yeah. Another question, just as you were reflecting on it in the weeks that followed, Mark, what was the view of the club about the season and what was then to come?
Well, I think the club would have viewed it as a successful season, but a missed opportunity. I think we went a bit off track the next year. Mark Bairstow left the club, went back to WA for personal reasons. Blighty's coaching continued. As an example, when he first came to the club, he'd go, "Hey guys, let's have some fun," like that. Next year it was, "Hey guys, let's have some fun." It's not the same. I don't know. I played the next year, but I think we would have expected to certainly got back in the top four again, and we were dismal in 1990, which was very disappointing. I retired 3 games to go before the end of the year in 1990 because I just had enough.
There's a question here from another listener, Malcolm Rulebook Ashwood, who's well known to Adelaideans, big Norwood man. He says, can you give us a few crazy Blight moments in his coaching career, things that he got you to do?
I wasn't involved in it, but he did get the guys together to dress up as Indians once up at Peter Burnett's house in Geelong before a game. I know that one. The other one, and I think Tony's captured this one, is that we had a terrible loss in '89. I forget who it was against, but we got walloped. It might have been Essendon early in the season. But straight after the game, he walked into the change rooms and said, "Right, mouth guards, Monday, you're going to do it tough." And when you did it tough with Blighty, it was tough. You would train for 4 hours. You'd do man on man. We were just dreading Monday. So we think about it Sunday. God, rest up. It's going to be a big night tomorrow night. Got to go to work, then go to training. Get to training, get stripped, put our mouth guards in. Some of us are sitting around shitting ourselves and whatever. And Blighty comes in and goes, "Right, get changed. Put your civvies on. One of your teammates has opened up a pub. We're going to go there and have a beer." Well, reverse psychology worked perfectly. So we trot down to Darren Flanagan's pub and have a few pots and talk about what's gone wrong. And he did the same in '89, the finals, when we got wiped by Essendon. He would drive up normally in his car and we would go on a bus. But after we got wiped in the first final, he came back on the bus with us and sat up the back with all the naughty boys sit. And he said, "So what do you blokes normally do coming home on the bus?" We go, "Oh, we always stop at Werribee for a leak. We might get some beer from the pub at Werribee, you know." So off we do it. We get a bin load of beer and discuss our strategy. And that changed the momentum. He's great at changing momentum, doing things that are just not normal. It's and the other one, I think it might be in the book too, Tony. I'm not telling all these stories.
No, just tell them all.
Coming back on the bus after '89, we stop at Werribee for our normal leak. For those people from interstate, that's where the sewage farm is, so we're being responsible. Anyway, I'm walking out to go leave the bus, and he grabs me, says, "Come and sit down. I want to have a talk to you." So I'm just going for a leak. I'll be back. So I came back, and he sits down next to me, and back in the day, end of season for me, you know. He goes, "Would you like a cigarette?" He hands me a menthol. I said, "I don't smoke menthol, Malcolm." But, no. So I pull out one of my own, Benson Hedges classic filter, and I stick it in my mouth, light mine, light his, and he put it in the wrong way. The menthol don't have a filter. It coughs his guts out. And I said, "Oh," and it broke the ice a little bit. We discussed the game and what we were going to do next year, and it didn't quite pan out. But he was a magic coach. I had great coaches, all of them. Blighty was the different one, and had a really good game plan.
Mark, there's a lovely piece in Tony's book and I was there this day. Dermot was the only Hawthorn person in a room of about 600 people. Remember that lunch, a Stone and Brownless lunch? And you and Dermot reenacted it on stage. And at one point, Dermot is lying on his back with a radio mic, still telling the story with you standing over him. It's just magic, but sort of testament to the fact that you guys can do that. I mean, there was obviously a lot of revenge at the moment of it, but since then, respect.
I agree. And one other thing that Dermot did, which I've never forgotten, there was certainly some angst there in the early days. It's a square-up thing. Anyway, but Tim McGrath here had a cancer scare a few years back, and he's in remission now, which is fantastic, and he's going well, Timmy. We wanted to organise a fundraiser for him on behalf of the Geelong past players, and they asked a number of people, I won't mention their names, but they didn't come. And we had a week before this function, and the past players looked at me and said, "Oh, do you reckon you can get Dermot?" Without a word of a lie, I just walked out the front, got on the phone, "Dermot, Yatesy." "Oh, g'day, mate." Rah. I said, "Listen, we were stuck. We've got to..." Told him the story. He drove down the highway with his girlfriend. He met my son, and there were probably 200 people in the room. We raised a lot of money for Tim, and he got a bottle of red wine for it. Great bloke. I count him as a friend. In fact, going to Tony's book launch the other night was fantastic. I've never spoken to Peter Schwab, great bloke. Chris Whitman now, who's in Geelong. I'm going to try and hook up with him one night when this isolation's over. But yeah, like, this great fellas. Dipper's a great fella. It's funny when you finish, you bash heads with blokes and you don't like them, and you find out they're just like you when all done, dust is settled, and it's great to catch up.
There's a lovely comment here from Jordan, your son, Mark, saying he's very, from Jordan, your son, he says he's very pleased that you were still able to conceive 2 children.
I might have had triplets if everything had been in shape.
Another one from Tim Baker, one of Australia's leading surfing writers up there at Currumbin. He asks, do you think that the rivalry that Hawthorn and Geelong have now comes out of that 89 grand final? It might even go back to your dad's day of 63. Could you comment on that?
I think it started it, but I think the 2009 grand final, it all comes together. Jeff Kennett's comments didn't help. I think it does. I think it does go back to that game and 63. Yeah.
It's been a great rivalry. Tinsel, did you enjoy doing the project?
Oh, I love the project. The project was, as you'd say, I mean, actually, Harmsy gave me a lot of help early in the project because it was something it's worth acknowledging that you were going to do, right? You actually did the first steps of writing the 1989 book, I think in 2008 or something. Was it, Harmsy?
Quite a while ago, yeah.
So you gave me your address book, which was very nice of you, and you gave me tips like definitely interview Darren Flanagan. There you go. That's so there's an element of help that we gave each other, and I went into it thinking, oh, this will be good, but it's footy guys, and will I be able to get a good enough story? And yet the generosity, the sort of stuff that we've been doing today, where the story of the backhoe, and that's what sort of ends up delighting someone like me, that footy isn't just the wonder of what Ablett does with his body movement and kicking his 8th goal. And one of my challenges as a writer is to make that beautiful, because it undoubtedly is. But for me as a footballer and a footy fan, what I actually want to know is who was Alan Jeans. And we actually haven't spent that much time on it, but, the story of Alan Jeans in 1982 dropping Dipper getting drunk in the trainer's room, Dipper bad, and Alan Jeans trying to pick the team. Is that Dipper's voice I can hear? And going out to the trainer's room, and there's holding court with 40 people and a bottle of scotch, and Jeans says, "Come and talk to me. Don't make the noise. Come with me, Robert." He takes him out to doesn't go to his coach's room, takes him, winds him right through Glenferrie Oval to a dark office, the old coach's room, and gives him the cop hold against the wall with, "Don't you ever embarrass me in this way, and you are an embarrassment." He's got him and he's throwing him against the wall, and Dipper's crying, and they all the players do their impersonations of Dipper sobbing as he's being smashed against the wall by the coach, and that kind of stuff that doesn't necessarily couldn't happen now, but has an element of folklore now at Hawthorn. To me, that builds the fabric of the game, and as those stories were told, and my job was to piece together different versions and create a cohesive history out of 15 or 20 voices. I mean, it was really challenging and also exhilarating.
Well, look, it's better that you did it, Tinsel, because I think you hold the balance of this in the book really, really well and really, really effectively. You were on the list, and you're from a Hawthorn family where your father played in the 71 premiership. So you had relationships with a lot of these players, which I, as a writer, would never have had. And you had the capacity to open that up, and really they opened up to you. So I think that's a massive many strengths of the book. And yeah, congratulations. It's fantastic. Absolutely.
Thanks, Harmsy. I've got mine to hold up too, if you think of doubling the promo works. Where's yours, Yates?
Actually, my son's got it. He's reading it.
Oh, good. That's nice to hear.
So, Mark, thank you so much for being part of this afternoon. The insights, first-hand insights, are just phenomenal. I'm sure people have been really enjoying and engaged by what's gone on. Thanks so much, Mark.
Something to do, Harmsy.
We better have another game of golf soon.
We only do it every Saturday afternoon, sit around. Actually, this is what I've been doing.
What have you got there?
It's what he plays golf in.
Is that a Rasta cap
No,
you've got there,
doing
Yates?
dress ups later.
Well, I'm up in the kids' playroom, so I'm ready to go as well, actually, on that front. So, I don't know, who do I look like there? I look like Greg Anderson from the Crows, don't I?
You look like Gary Ayres. All I can do is offer you my 1967 Geelong badge. Anyway, everyone, here's the book, 1989, The Great Grand Final. What else have I got to say here before we round it off? Copies of the 89 Great Grand Final are available to borrow from the Geelong Regional Libraries when the libraries reopen. And of course, bookshops are selling them, which would be great. This book deserves to be on your shelf. And Tinsel, what else? You have the Selwood books out?
Yeah, I have. I bought one of those up here too. So for a Geelong audience, if the kids are looking for something to do in this era, they're a recreation of the childhood in Bendigo. A loud, noisy, pre-screens, four kids mucking around together, dreaming of footy. And they've been really popular. So if kids are looking for a footy read, there's an audiobook version as well that you can get on borrowed book box through the libraries. So, have a listen or a read of the Selwood boys. And actually, if you want a pack of footy books, I've made them on my website. A boy called Bob and the Selwoods and the 89, and I can send some books out to people if they're keen. My Bob Murphy books are signed as well.
And there's one other I want to mention, and I see Rob Heath is amongst the listeners this afternoon, and that's the film that you guys did called The Galahs, and that's available too as a DVD.
It is, through Madman Entertainment. The story of the 1967 tour of Ireland by Harry Beitzel's boys. It's a precursor to the international rules concept, and it's just a really great story of an entrepreneurial spirit and a kind of just the greats of the game. Last interviews with Barras, and Skilts speaks beautifully in it, and yeah, it's a good one.
Great stuff, Tinsel. I'll see you around the streets of the People's Republic.
Yep, see you there. And can I say, Yatesy, no one has given more to this project. Apart from his interview, he was brilliant. And then here he is at the launch and at this. And I've just really loved it. When he arrived at the launch, he said, hey, couldn't get you an 89, but here I am, Glenferrie Hotel, 100 metres from the ground. And I just want to let you know I've got coronavirus and I plan on infecting you all tonight. So that was a good way to start. Become less funny, coronavirus, though, hasn't it, Yatesy? Have you gone mute on us?
Well, you
got to turn your microphone back on.
Oh,
there
I just gave you a spray. No, thanks, Tony. I've really enjoyed it. It's a good book. If it wasn't a good book, if it was just bloody crap, I wouldn't be any part of it. So buy the book, people.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, and there'll be more of these. Well, let me read it. The Geelong Regional Library is working hard to bring you many more live stream and recorded webinars and virtual events for children, teens and adults. So please keep an eye on the website, www.grlc.vic.gov.au for all the virtual events. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Tinsel. I'm signing off from the People's Republic. Have a great afternoon.
Hooroo.